A new rift with China to talk about. Beijing is responding to President Trump's latest 25% tariff on $16 billion worth of Chinese goods by placing equal fresh tariffs on U.S. imports, from crude oil to steel, cars, medical equipment. All of the above getting taxed. Joining me now to discuss is Robert Kuhn. He is host of Closer to China with R.L. Kuhn on CGTV. He's the author of How China's Leaders Think. Good to see you, Robert.
Hi, Maria.
Thank you so much for joining us. What's your take on this latest news out of the U.S. and now China retaliating?
The latest news is not as important as the overall structure. We expect to see these. This is nothing unexpected. But I think what we have to do is really look at the total picture. People talk about trade war, and that's why we have these tariffs. But trade war, in terms of the deficit, is really a very complex and not the most important issue. The trade deficit has to do with a lot of intermediary products that get charged into that have components coming from South Korea or Japan. A great deal of service money that China pays for its students and travel in the U.S. does not count. It's complicated, and Americans benefit from the trade deficit because we get cheaper products at better quality, financed by other people, the Chinese in this case. But it has to be solved. But there are 5 big issues that the sophisticated people are really concerned about. They're concerned about opening markets in China. They're concerned about intellectual property protection. They're concerned about cyber security, industrial espionage. They're concerned about forced technology transfer and joint ventures. And finally, the subsidy of the Chinese government of industry, of technologies of the future.
Is tariffs going to change any of that?
Well, tariffs at least will get people's attention. Everybody's focused on this, but tariffs themselves are a significant sub-optimization. Companies are now making decisions in supply chains, et cetera, that will have long-term implications that will cause the entire world to be less efficient in delivering the prosperity that we need in the future. But what we have to do is to look at these 5 issues, and China's making progress on some of them. They're opening up markets, and that's the big opportunity for American companies.
It's true.
And that's the key. We have to keep focusing on it because that's good for the Chinese economy as well. Chinese economists tell me privately that that is good for China because China needs more competition in its own markets in order to make Chinese enterprises more competitive.
Interesting. Very
interesting. The combination of what U.S. companies need in opening the markets is also good for China.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is really hopeful news here because I know earlier discussions with the administration, there were times where the Chinese government would not even really acknowledge the problems related to intellectual property theft, et cetera. Now you think this is a regime that understands it needs to change the terms of trade?
It's not that I think. I have firsthand knowledge. I've been talking to people. Take intellectual property protection. I've been looking at it. I've been investigating that in China. They've set up special intellectual property courts. Limited now. They're pilots. Shanghai, for example, is very strong in this area. And they are really focused on this. And this is good, again, for China because China's enterprises want to be innovative. Innovation is the #1 priority of President Xi Jinping in terms of the economy. So in order to achieve that, they have to have intellectual property protection. So many of these things that America wants to force, which is good for American companies, is now also good for China. That's the hope of the future.
By the way, Alibaba just reported earnings. The earnings missed expectations, but the revenue was a beat, and actually the stock is moving. It is up 4% on Alibaba right now. My issue with all of this, Robert, is that I don't know if tariffs are going to actually change the behavior of China in terms of their theft of America's IP. Is tariffs going to be the thing that actually get China to say, okay, let's stop stealing? They won't even admit they're doing it.
Well, you've put a lot of comments into that one sentence. And so we have to kind of
she's efficient.
We have to tease it apart and look at each of the pieces. First of all, this is recognized as an issue. Tariffs get everyone's attention, although they're terribly sub-optimized and all economists think they're bad. But it's getting everybody's attention. We're talking about it here. So we're talking about all the issues. China, when it was admitted to the WTO in 2001, was truly a developing country. And now some of those same ways of thinking and rules China has maintained for almost 20 years now. And so what that means is that China has to have a new way of thinking about itself. And this attention is forcing that. So in each of these categories of concern, we talked about intellectual property, great progress. Has a long way to go, and it's uneven in China, to be sure.
Yeah.
But it is making progress. In industrial theft, 3 years ago, In 2015, it was a much more serious issue. China and the U.S. faced it. They dealt with it privately, and it was substantially reduced. It's not completely reduced. It's an area of focus. But I want to focus on the positive, which is the first, opening markets.
Yeah, I agree.
China will be opening more of its markets. That's the key to solving the problem for both countries.
Certainly within 5 years, right? You will be allowed to own an auto company out in China within 5 years. Robert, great insights from you. We really appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Robert Kuhn there.